there. Welcome to Beyond the Scale, True Healing. If you're new here, thanks for checking us out. If you've been with us before, welcome back. And in either case, please be sure to subscribe. It really helps us get this content in front of more people so that they too can learn how to heal with Carnivore. Today, we're talking with Brett Lloyd, Carnivore champion, Revero Coach, and mental health warrior. Brett has healed so many things with his carnivore way of life and has been such an inspiration to many new carnivores. Brett, welcome. Please take a minute to tell us about how you ended up here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to get to talk with you all in your audience. You want the Reader's Digest version, or do you want the full version?
Whichever you prefer.
I was, how I got here, I was raised in a traditional standard American, mom, dad. I had a sister. My mom and dad had an enormous vegetable garden. We had fresh vegetables year round. We had plenty of meat. Everything, every meal, every dinner, especially, it was the food pyramid. Balance, all this kind of stuff. And out of the four of us, my little baby 6 foot tall sister almost died from ulcerative colitis, IBS. She still has. I tried to get her to go carnivore, but she's done research. Anyway, my father passed away in 2020 after 20 plus years with type 2 diabetes that he never treated correctly and no doctor ever told him he could get rid of. That finally crapped out his kidneys, and I had the honor of helping him and my mother with home hospice, helping my dad pass. My mom's had numerous physical issues throughout her life. Had a gallbladder taken out at a young age, all sorts of things, numerous surgeries. And I suffered from chronic mental illness for over 43 years of my 61 years of life. And that's from the standard American diet. That's what that did for us. I had started experiencing symptoms I now know around the age of 15. That's when sleep disruptions began. There was one other thing that happened also that contributed to my mental illness, we think. And I just learned about this a couple of years ago. When I was 11 years old, I got hit by a car. And my parents tell me that before that accident, I was a happy, fun to be around kid. Everybody liked me. But after that accident, I turned into this angry, dark thing. And I don't remember that at all. I don't remember being angry like that because of the accident. But I was voted class grouch in my senior superlatives, and I was offended at that at first, but then a few years later, I'm like, I earned that. I was grouchy. I was very hard to talk to. And that didn't improve as I got older because my parents told me, when growing up, I had to eat what was served. Mom or dad put it on the plate, you had to eat it all. There was no, I don't like this, I don't like that. No, you ate it all. But they always told me when you get out on your own, you can eat whatever you want. So when I got out on my own, my diet got a whole lot worse with beer, pizza, fast food, and a beer chaser. And I had a promising career in mental health at one time. I was actually working in the field in a private profit hospital in Johnson City, Tennessee for almost 2 years. And I sabotaged it completely. Sabotaged that whole deal foolishly. And I was already becoming more and more depressed. I wasn't aware that I was, but I started making really bad decisions on a consistent basis, and it was never my fault. It was always somebody else was at fault for my error, circumstances beyond my control, whatever kind of nonsense I created between my ears to justify doing the unjustifiable. And it was interesting during those 2 years. I know now for sure I was experiencing severe depression, but here I am around all these psychologists and psychiatrists, all these PhD level folks. Nobody picked up on it. Nobody said a word about depression. They thought I just partied too much. And I did, but I realize now I was medicating myself because I was miserable otherwise. Fast forward, at the age of 30, my life became so unmanageable that I checked myself into River Park Psychiatric Hospital in Huntington, West Virginia, October 1st, 1990. That's when I was first formally diagnosed with major depression. I spent 16 days there and basically didn't get much in the way of treatment. I got some advice and a lot of free samples of Prozac because the insurance would only pay for 16 days. Now, if I'd actively tried to harm myself, I might have gotten to stay longer, but thankfully that was not in play. And Prozac back then was ridiculously expensive. Oh, it was terribly, terribly expensive. And once the samples ran out, I couldn't afford to keep buying it, and my insurance wouldn't pay for it. So I made what I thought were some appropriate attitude adjustments, trying to prioritize things in a more realistic manner. And then I got divorced. I was not a very good husband. I wasn't a very good person then. Like I said, I was angry all the time. And that's not conducive to a happy home, as you might well imagine. Was fortunate enough to meet my current and final wife, and we started living under one roof in, I never can get that year, 1996. Yeah, 96. And life was pretty good. We actually got married in 97. And then around 98, 99, 1999, my mood started cratering. A couple of years, I'm sorry, I'm getting out of place here. A couple of years before that, a physician, I was living in Newport, Tennessee, and started having crazy panic attacks. Just awful. One was so bad, I thought I was having a heart attack and called, 911, got to do the nitro under the tongue, ambulance ride, the whole 9 yards, and hooked up to, I guess it was an EKG machine, and found out there was nothing wrong with my heart, which was a good thing. But why did I didn't really understand what was going on. And I'm a musician, and then I had really long hair. And I'll never forget, I went to a doctor to get some guidance and do what's going on with me. And he literally made me strip down to prove I had no needle marks, because he was convinced I was freebasing cocaine, and that was never a part of my life on any level. He based that purely on my appearance, and I was a musician. But I found this doctor in Newport, Tennessee, after a really bad panic attack where I was driving, and all of a sudden I thought my heart was just going to jump out of my chest. And he said, if you don't start taking meds right now, your life's going to become very uncomfortable. So I had insurance then, and they were different insurance, and Prozac was became a part of my life for the next 23 years. I took it as prescribed always. Me and my present and final wife, God willing, she's forbidden to die first. That's why I say that. We had a good first couple of 3 years were really good together, but then my mood just started cratering at times for no apparent reason. There was nothing, no job loss. It wasn't problems between she and I. It just happened. And this began what I call the illness wellness cycle. My periods of wellness started to shrink and my periods of illness started to increase. Mm-hmm. We found out that full moons could set me off. Had no idea. But it makes sense, human body's 90% water and full moons affect the tides, so why wouldn't it affect human physiology? Fast forward to 2006, there was a family thing that happened that I don't go into detail about. Wasn't about my wife, thankfully. And I had basically a textbook nervous breakdown. There was a 2-month period of time when I did not sleep more than 1 or 2 hours. And when you don't get enough sleep at that level, very bad things start to happen to you. My diagnosis got changed from major depression to major depression with psychotic features, because when you hear kids playing in the yard and you're the only one at home, that's not a good thing. And they put me on this medication. I took a lot of drugs over the years as prescribed. And this is one of the few whose name I remember very well. It's called Remeron. And I slept for 2 weeks on Remeron. And it was glorious. I felt so good to sleep. But Remeron is a notorious weight gaining drug. I gained like 25 pounds in those 2 weeks. Still eating garbage. Diet is never brought up as having anything to do with my mental illness. But after the end of that 2-week period on the Remeron, I went on another 6-week tear of only sleeping 1 or 2 hours. And then the doctor brought out the antipsychotic meds. He put me on a drug called Symbyax, which is a combination of Prozac with an antipsychotic. And that stopped my mood from cratering even more. But the side effects were I would sleep 10 to 12 hours a night. And then during the day, I would have to take 1 or 2 1 to 2 hour naps.
Wow.
It was not much of a life. It was an existence. Music for me is a very emotional kind of thing. And I didn't touch my guitar for over a year because it terrified me. I shuddered to think what might come out of me if I picked that up and started playing. But along the lines of, toward the end of 2008, I was like, I got to do something. This is terrible. I mean, this is just awful. And I came to terms with the familial thing that happened and realized, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. I didn't make the decision to separate from the family, et cetera, et cetera. That's water under the bridge. It's time to get on with life. And I decided I'm going to start feeling better. I have to. I can't keep living like this. And I made some improvements with that, but not very many. But I remember telling my wife, I put on so much weight because people aren't aware of it. Psych meds are weight gaining drugs. I mean, they literally are. That's the one thing psych meds were good for, putting on weight. And I'm only 6 foot tall, and right then I was about 260. And I was telling my wife, I said, I really don't like being this heavy. I need to lose some weight. And she said, well, I've heard a lot of great things about this Atkins diet. Why don't you look into it? So I get online and I look up Atkins and okay, in my own little crazy way, I read just enough of the directions. Okay, no carbs. You can have all the meat you want and you can have all the Atkins snacks you want. Sure, I can do that. And I lost 35 pounds in just like 3 or 4 months. My mood got better, but at no time did myself or my wife or my doctor put the improved mood with the change in diet.
Mhm. Yeah.
I got to go to my 30-year high school reunion, had a wonderful time. I started playing music again. I started writing songs. I wrote a couple of faith-based albums. I'm performing in churches, sharing my faith story. And life's pretty good. And then in May of 2010, I'm like, I really miss ice cream. Stephanie and Claire, I miss coconut cream pie. I miss coconut cakes. Those triple decker things you could get at Walmart or Sam's Club that are just huge, and I could eat one of those in a day and a half. And that was a really bad idea. My thinking was, well, if I put weight back on, I can just go back on Atkins. What could go wrong?
Yeah, you couldn't expect the mental clarity you got without that.
Exactly. And in July of 2010, I'm at Mass. I'm a thankful Catholic convert. Mass is very important to me. And it was on a Sunday evening, and right before communion, I have this overwhelming feeling all of a sudden that if I don't get out of there right now, something really bad is about to happen. And it frightened me enough to where I literally ran out of the church. 15 minutes later, I'm curled up on our couch at home, bawling like a baby and have no idea why. And this began the worst 5 years of my life. My wife's job got moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where we still reside. We knew no one. I had to go fishing for doctors. That was a lot of fun. And one lady was certain it was my thyroid, and she gave me a thyroid medication that literally felt like it was about to blow the top of my head off. And then she fired me. I didn't know doctors could fire patients, but she fired me because I had the audacity to complain. Finally, I found a nurse practitioner who seemed to understand what I was trying to describe, and she did what they all do. She threw drugs at me. I mean, this is more antipsychotic meds, Abilify, Seroquel, put me on Lamictal, which is actually a seizure medication that's used off-label for people with depression. And it was, same thing would happen. I would feel a little bit better or not get worse for a time. And then it would all just go away, I'd fall back in the ditch really hard, deeper than ever before. I actually thought with Seroquel that might be the answer because I had a 6-month period there where I was very creative, wrote an album, recorded what is probably the best guitar solo I'll ever record in my life. It was a creatively productive time, but it just got worse and worse. Fast forward to January of 2015, I weighed 289 pounds. I'm on 7 different meds. I had horrible anxiety. I was on Ativan for that. I went to sleep for eight and a half years with trazodone, which is an SSRI, but it's used off label to help with insomnia. And it did help me sleep, but I woke up with a lovely drug hangover every morning of my life for that 8 years. And I was still writing music. I've got a recording studio. And I had written some blues music that I couldn't sing. And I went on Craigslist and put an ad out, and this extraordinarily talented lady named Kimmy Wade, who I always mention by name because without her, you and I are not talking. I'm in the ground if she doesn't show up. And she's watching me fall apart. She's watching it get worse and worse and worse. And she mentions to me one day, she's like, have you ever thought about medical marijuana? Like, well, that was around the time when Oregon and Colorado were voting in medical marijuana programs and things like that. I'm like, well, as a musician, it was always around, but I had a bad experience with it when I was young. So, and beer was legal. What do I need that for? You know, it just wasn't my thing. And I did a little research and found some anecdotal evidence, very reminiscent of how people find carnivore. They find anecdotes, and people were experiencing some symptom relief. And my wife and I were like, well, at this point, what is there left to try? Because the last psychiatrist I'll ever have, not named Georgia Eade or Dr. Chris Palmer, told me that I should seriously consider either electroshock therapy or institutionalizing myself voluntarily for an extended hospital stay. And I had seen ECT patients after the treatment,
Yeah.
you could call it that. There wasn't any way anybody was going to do that to me. They looked like animated corpses. And I was very much afraid that if I put myself in a facility, I might never get to come out. But my friend mentioned medical marijuana. I found that research. My wife and I were like, can't hurt to try, you know? We secured 4 grams of flour, which is just a tiny little bit of cannabis. And she found a cannabutter recipe. And she made these little quarter-sized cookies. They weren't carnivore cookies by any measure. They were keto-ish. And I was scared to death of those things because of the bad experience I had with cannabis when I was young. And I broke one in half and ate it. 10 minutes after that, I felt like 1,000 suns had lifted off of me. I wasn't high yet. I just didn't feel like crap anymore for the first time in years. And then about 40 minutes later, the high kicked in, and cannabis did something no medication ever came close to doing. It actually treated my symptoms effectively. The anxiety was enormously diminished. My mood improved significantly. I met my wife and son at the door when they came home from work that day because I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. I was socially inappropriate in an extreme way. I was just not fit for being out of the house. I was smiling when they came in, and my wife was like, "What's wrong?" Nothing's wrong. I ate half a cookie. It works. It works. Well, it took her a few weeks to see me eat the cookies before she believed it. She thought it was just another temporary short-term fix, but cannabis really made a difference. And so that became part of my deal. Well, 10 days after that first cookie, I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, ladies, and I'm trying to put my shoes on, and my belly is in the way. And I realize it. I'm like, holy crap, this is not good. This is not good at all. One thing about my depression that I haven't mentioned, that I need to mention now. I got to where I could not accurately perceive my environment.
Yeah.
My illness would filter and twist what I saw and what I heard, and never in my favor. My awesome wife would say, you know, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. But that wouldn't be what I heard. What I heard was, yeah, it looks like it's going to be another beautiful day. That's just great.
Yeah.
And I adore my wife. Well, I hear that. Honey, what's wrong? And she, looked at me like the crazy person I was. I just told you, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. So it got to where she couldn't talk to me. I couldn't understand her, and she for certain couldn't understand anything I was saying. And that's why I tell people, if anybody's earned their place in heaven, it's my wife for putting up with the nightmare that was me for all those years. So couldn't perceive my environment accurately, but cannabis fixed that to a degree. And I go and I look in the mirror and I see myself accurately for the first time, and Lord knows when. I look like somebody who's been made up to walk on the set of The Walking Dead.
Okay.
That pasty gray, green around the eyes, sunken in eyes. I looked like somebody that was on the verge of having a stroke and or a heart attack at any moment. And I immediately told my wife, tonight I want an Atkins dinner. We're going back to Atkins. I'm going back to Atkins. And I started walking my dog a half a block here and a half a block there. And then I increased it to a whole block. I was very slow and very deliberate because I knew if I injured myself, it could very well kill me. Because I had been sedentary for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And weighing 289 pounds, my left hip hurt something terrible. My right shoulder hurt something awful. Trying to sleep was a real thrill. I was literally starting to disintegrate from being so heavy. It was just not a good thing. But started eating Atkins, started walking the dog very carefully, and one block became 3 blocks, and then how far am I walking? And I got a GPS program and put it on my phone, and I found out how far from our front door was a half a mile away, so I could start doing mile walks. I got to where I was doing 30 and 40 miles a week, and over the next 3 years, I walked off 94 pounds. At the end of 2015, I was off the antipsychotic medications and the SSRIs. At the end of 2016, I was off the benzodiazepines, although that was very hard to come off of because the day after I took my last 1/8 of a milligram, I woke up with vertigo. I had to deal with vertigo for the next 3 months.
Yeah. I can relate. I've
it
been
was horrible. It was horrible. And then at the end of 2017, I was off the trazodone. And since then, I have not had any pharmaceutical medications except for antibiotics a couple of times for upper respiratory infection that I had. I'm feeling pretty good, but I'm still crazy as a bed bug. I'm just a little bit more, cannabis made me a little more socially acceptable, and it made life better for my wife, which I'm really glad about. And she was so happy with it. She made sure that she would literally walk through broken glass to make sure I got cannabis if I needed it. May of 2018, that same lady who suggested I try medical marijuana calls me or messages me and says, "You got to watch every video made by this guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson. You're going to love him." Okay. And I found at that time, when you first would do a search for Jordan Peterson, you would get what we later called the Jordan Peterson Destroys collection, where clips of him just rendering media people unable to speak with nothing but common sense and logic. And I loved it. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. He made me laugh so hard. So that my 420 routine was eat a cookie, watch Jordan Peterson videos. I come across, I get emotional about this memory. I come across a 30-minute cutout of him on Joe Rogan, where he starts talking about his daughter figured out that if she only ate beef, salt, and water, that all her horrible arthritis symptoms went away and her depression, her chronic depression symptoms went away. And then he starts telling me that he suffered from mental illness too, which I found just shocking beyond words for him to be able to function on that intellectual level that he did as a mentally ill man. And he described how his anxiety went away and how his depression improved significantly just eating meat. And then he never cheated. Now, if it's anybody but Jordan Peterson telling me this, the man who part of his shtick, if you will, is always tell the truth, or at least don't lie. If it's anybody but him, I'm changing the channel and looking for something else to watch, because just eating meat, that's crazy. But because it was him, when my wife got home that evening, I'm like, I need you before dinner, I need you to sit down and watch this with me, because I need to make sure I'm really hearing what I think I'm hearing. And she's like, at the end of, yeah, he's really saying he ate meat and he drank water and this is what happened. And why didn't somebody tell me that was possible? Why didn't any of the psychiatrists, any of the doctors, any of the nurses, any of the nurse practitioners, why didn't anybody mention that to me? So I start looking. I'm thinking, well, maybe this is just something new or what? And the first person I find when I search for carnivore is Sean Baker on Joe Rogan. And again, you've got this man with incredible integrity. He used to have the codes to launch the nuclear missiles from the silo. They just don't let anybody have that. You've got to be an extraordinarily well put together person of impeccable integrity. And I watched the dietary portion of that episode probably 50 times because I'm thinking, there's got to be a flaw in the logic. This is too good to be true. But I couldn't find a flaw because there is none.
Yeah.
And then the next person I find is Amber O'Hearn, who gave a talk in 2017 about how as a species, we literally came down out of the trees because we started eating meat. I learned I had a cecum. I didn't even know I had a cecum. Come to find out, that's what an appendix is. I didn't know all this. But I looked at my wife after watching that talk, and my wife's watching all this with me. And I said, I have to start. I have to do this. I can't not try it. What do we have to lose? July 16th, 2018 was my very first day eating meat and drinking water. And I have stuck with it. I have never cheated. Not one time. Today is my 1577th day of just eating meat. On the 10th morning, I woke up without joint pain for the first time as an adult. I never thought of myself as arthritic. I just thought I had the normal aches and pains of being 57 years old. And somebody, I was an athlete, as a musician, I'm a lead guitar player. I'm one of those guys who would jump up on the table to play a solo and do all that kind of stuff. And sometimes the tables cooperated, sometimes they didn't. And when they didn't, you protected the instrument, you kept on playing. And if you walked around looking like a question mark for the next 2 or 3 days, hey, that's rock and roll. So that morning I woke up and I'm taking early morning walks then. except for that morning, I skipped because I could, because it didn't hurt. And I'm giggling to myself like a little boy. Then on the 24th day, I'm taking my walk. And one of the biggest fears I had when I started the carnivore diet was that I think I was better before I really was. I did not want to experience a placebo event. But I'm walking along, and it was like somebody flipped the switch. And all that rage, and all that anger, and all that shadowy darkness, and all that crap that kept me from being the person I always wanted to be, it just went away. It vanished. It left me, never to return as long as I keep eating this way. And it was replaced by a waterfall of joy that hasn't left me since. And I knew this is a gift, and I had to treat it like the gift that it is. And it's why I do these kinds of talks, because people need to know you're not broken. Mom and dad didn't make a mistake. You were just taught to eat things we should never, ever have put into our mouth. I also knew 5 minutes after that moment that I was going to have to meet these people and thank them. And earlier this year, I had the privilege of spending almost 10 minutes with Jordan Peterson in private in Pensacola, Florida, and I got to thank him. And that's why I do these talks, because there's a solution. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to take meds to manage symptoms. You can eliminate them entirely by only eating meat and drinking water. And that's what got me to here.
I would like to add something to you, Brett, because you know it, because you know me since I started the carnivore diet, because I joined Revero and I was attending your meeting for mental health. And you were my Jordan Peterson, you know.
Thank you.
And you helped me so much at the beginning of my journey. You helped me so much, and you reassure me for so many things, you know. You were the first person where I put my video on. I was hiding at the beginning of the meeting with you. I
remember that. I remember that.
and yeah, I put in your meeting, I put my video on, and then, as you've done, I've never went out of the road since I started carnivore and I got my mental clarity back. I never skipped one day. I never had a cheat meal. And after a couple of months, I reached out to you because I was that scared of eating carbs that I was avoiding communion at mass. I don't know if you remember this.
I do. I get asked that a lot. I remember that a little bit. Yeah, I do.
And I reached out to you, and you reassured me, and you say, come on, you can do it, and it won't affect your mental health. But you were so my big reference for this, and I'm so thankful and so grateful. And yeah, you've been my example, you know.
Well, thank you very much for that. You're the second person who's told me I was their Jordan Peterson. What a great gift you just gave me. Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me know that. It means a lot. Because I hate social media. I despise it. And there are lots of times that I've come this close to just saying, screw this. It's taking up too much time. And then I hear stuff like this from you. A couple of years ago, I was really frustrated. That's when the censoring and all this nonsense started happening. And I was very seriously, I was praying for guidance. You know, I don't want to do this anymore, being an advocate and all that. But then I'm not really a crybaby all the time, I swear. But I got this message, an audio message from this young man who listened, I think, to the Carnivore cast that I had done. And he said, Brett, because I listened to you, I don't want to kill myself anymore. How do you turn away from that? I can't. So that's why I'm the advocate that I am. It's why my message is consistent. And when everybody who needs to hear what I have about my story, needs to hear about my experience, has done so, then I can go back to just being a guitar player.
You're touching so many people. There are so many who suffer from depression and anxiety, and I'm going to try not to get emotional here.
Oh, come on.
You
Join the party.
We are all.
Yeah. Your story reminds me of a few people in my life who are severely depressed, and it really hurts me to see them that way. I want to help so much. I want to help them, but I understand, because I've gone through bouts of depression myself. Coming off of Effexor was like sticking my tongue in a light socket. Horrible. But I felt sicker on it than I did off of it. But I understand when you're in the midst of that, hearing advice doesn't really help. It's too noisy inside your head to take that advice and apply it. So how can we reach people and convince them that food can heal them, or at least cutting out some foods can heal them?
Well, one of the things that there's a series of things that you can do. Number one, show them videos of people like me. And I know there's others besides me who had similar experiences, who are advocates and who do the interview thing. The other thing is you can tell them to not listen to their illness. Your illness is telling you these things. Your illness, depression, anxiety, are liars. They never have your best interest at heart. Their whole goal is to destroy you as slowly and as painfully as possible. And if they're still not willing, then you can just be the best example that they cannot ignore. Mm-hmm. Because you can't make the horse drink the water. You can dunk the horse's head in the pond, but you can't make him drink a drop. And some people aren't ready until they're ready. Some people have to experience have a near-death experience before they're like, yeah, maybe I need to make a change. And then I know it's hard to watch. I see people all the time. People interact, people come and follow me, carry on conversations. You know, I'd really like to do this, but I'm afraid of this, and this. And fear is a liar also. So I sympathize, but the most effective thing that I've ever seen work is just being an example they cannot ignore. Because real health, truly healthy people draw attention. It's just human nature. And 80% of that attention is always positive. And then there's the 20% who are sick themselves and who just have the personality, who get offended by seeing somebody healthier than they are. Being the best example seems to be the most effective way to reach those folks, because eventually, I give you, for instance, I have a client that, due to circumstances beyond her control, is forced to live with her parents. And she's raising a son. She's doing the best she can do, given she had a medication injury. Anyway, she started eating carnivore. And she was the first person who told me I was her Jordan Peterson, in fact. So it's apropos that I mentioned this person's case in this way. And everybody in the family, her family, thought that she should put herself in a rehab facility. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to eat meat, I'm going to drink water, and I'm going to get better. Well, she was suffering from terrible anxiety and depression. She's symptom free from anxiety and depression to this day. Her family, she's got 1 or 2 sisters that are carnivore. Her mom, who I had the privilege of meeting during a session one day, who was like, she was on board with it. And then a couple of days later, she had seen a video or read something about how fruit prevents cancer. Anyway, yeah, but she's carnivore today. All because the daughter, who's still suffering from the medication injury, still living in the same place, but her mood is beautiful. And to look at her, you would never know that something bad had happened to her, that she was debilitated in any way. And it was the example that the family could not ignore in a moment longer. And even her dad, who was vehemently against the notion of just eating meat, has gone, she describes him as carnivore-ish. So he's already moved many steps in the right direction, just because she was an example they could not ignore.
That is wonderful.
It is.
That gives me hope.
So keep eating your meat, keep drinking the water, keep smiling, keep letting people know how happy you are. That's another thing. I experience effortless daily happiness every day of my life. I wake up smiling before my feet ever hit the floor. It doesn't matter what's happening, real life doesn't stop throwing boulders at you. They're just so much easier to navigate these days.
Yeah.
And
I'm doing the same as you, each time I'm going out, I'm wearing a shirt saying, keep it carnivore, eat the meat heals. Always, working in my office, I always have a sweater saying that meat heals. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Because if it starts a conversation, there's an opportunity to help somebody.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I just recently joined a new band, and of course I don't go anywhere. God told me, yeah, I'll let you play music again, but you got to advertise that you eat meat and drink water every time you do something musical. So while everybody else gets all primped up and everything, I've got an eat meat, drink water shirt going of some type or another for everything I do music wise. And the drummer one day finally asked, so you really just only eat meat? Yeah, that's it. That's all I eat. He asked a couple of other questions, and then I found out from the band text message that we all share that Sunday was his day number 1.
Wow.
Eating meat and drinking water. 69 years old. Great drummer. Good guy.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, and I didn't proselytize in any way. They asked me questions, I answered them.
Right.
And I think he went and watched a few videos. I told him, you know, you want to know the whole story about what I've been through, just put my name in the search engine on YouTube and you'll see interviews that I've done. Life is good when you only eat meat and drink water.
Right. We see, I've seen recently some comments on some of your posts. So while life is good for us, it seems like maybe not for some other people, some angry vegans maybe try to argue with you or discredit you. How do you handle that? Like, does it bother you?
I usually enjoy the crap out of it. I have fun with it because I only talk about carnivore from my experience, and their ideology cannot explain me away. I've got lab work that shows how on paper I'm stupidly healthy. My trigs have gone down every year I've been carnivore. They're now, I had my last lab work was done in February of this year. My trigs were only 53.
And you published it. So
oh yeah, of course I did. It's there. You can find it. It's not hard to find. I published it all. I don't pay for it either. I don't really care what my lab values are. How I feel is how I judge my health. But other people want to know bad enough, you pony up the money, I'll go get the lab work done and I'll share it with the world, no matter what it says. And I've done that twice now. Some doctor in Kansas in 2019, like, I got to know what your vitamin D levels are. I'm like, well, I live in Florida and I'm outside as much as possible. I expect they're probably pretty good. How much would it cost to get to find out? He sent me $200. And I got that done. I got an A1C done. And I got my lipids done. And gosh, I'm not near death. Sean Baker was like, yeah, you're at death's door, all right. But vegans, I feel sorry for them to start with. I cannot imagine what life looks like through their eyes.
I can imagine. I've been vegan in the past. And I was the depressive girl, and I was taking all these antidepressants, and I was taking all these sleeping drugs, and I was taking all these. And yeah, I can imagine what their life looks like and how convinced they are, but they are doing great.
Well, see, I don't ever come at vegans. I don't seek them out. They find me. They want to argue with me. Okay, you want to argue with me? Good luck. Because number one, you're not changing my mind.
Of course.
I don't believe in your myth. I don't believe in the propaganda. I don't think cow farts are harming the planet in any way, shape, or form. Eating meat is an ancestrally appropriate thing for human beings to do. And I lost 43 years worth of chronic mental illness symptoms, and I'm maintaining my sanity and happiness by only eating meat. Do you honestly, sincerely think that I'm going to risk my sanity that I didn't have for the majority of my life to satisfy your ideology? Get real. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So, you know, vegans want to come at me. You're just wasting your time. But if you want to, come on. I'll have fun. You won't. I mean, I don't seek them out because I've got better things to do with my time. And what's on somebody else's plate is none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I will ever say, if a vegan's dumb enough to attack me, I'm like, eventually, hey, I'm sorry that your brain is nutrient deficient. I am not nutrient deficient. Yeah, where are you getting your B12 from?
Nutriently deficient and inflamed.
Horribly inflamed, you know, and when you find out how inflammatory plants are, and that cellulose is not digestible by human beings. And you learn all these things, and it's like, veganism is the most anti-human, in my opinion, the most anti-human ideology going today. It makes Marxism look like a party.
Yeah.
Because if you follow veganism to its ultimate conclusion, all the humans are dead.
Right.
Yeah.
In like 4 generations, it's all over. The animals will all be roaming around free to eat one another on a whim, just like they always were before we became so plentiful, you know?
It's great we saved all the animals, but
Yeah, we did.
then who's going to take care of them?
Uh-huh. Exactly. And they don't understand, you know, if a cow was let free to roam naturally, it would suffer it would be eaten alive. It would suffer the most horrible demise possible versus getting a bolt to the brain where they die instantly and there's no suffering at all. Vegans fortunately don't come at me too often.
Yeah. I just, the one that said, this isn't sustainable long term. I was like, those 20 plus year vegans and certain tribes around the world would disagree with that, but
it's 4 years and 4 months I've been carnivore. There's a group of vegans on Twitter who you won't, after 5 years, natural selection will take care of you. And I said, well, after 5 years, I'm gonna let you know I'm just fine. Because I feel amazing. I have not experienced a moment of downside. And vegans will be like, oh, of course you have, because that's got to be the most monotonous eating in the world, to eat just bacon and ground beef every meal, every day. I'm like, no, man, it's the most delicious stuff I've ever put in my mouth every meal, every day. What's boring about that? Besides, it's fuel, it's nutrition. Food was never my entertainment. Never.
Thank you so much, Brett. Keep sharing your story, your faith, your gratitude. We appreciate you so much. And thank you to our viewers. We will have all of Brett's links listed in the description, along with all the ways that you can follow Claire and me, as well as links to upcoming group challenges and individual coaching. And until next time, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.